Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of OC Habitat Spotlight interview series. My name is Kim, and today we have Matt Spooner as our guest. Matt is actually one of our board members here at OC Habitats, and in this episode, I will be asking him a series of questions that will highlight his work in environmental conservation with specific focus on his work with OC Habitats. So, Matt, my first question is, what is your educational and professional background?
Sure. Well, my educational background is that I got my undergraduate degree, my Bachelor of Arts from UCLA, and I actually studied anthropology there. Fittingly enough, I never did anything with anthropology other than use it in my day-to-day life. I studied cultural anthropology, so it was all about really getting to know different cultures, understanding people, really trying to understand where they were coming from and where they were at, and not making any preconceived judgments on folks. That's a large part of what cultural anthropology is about. Not completely, but a large chunk of it. So my career has been in both the nonprofit space as well as in the for-profit space. When I worked in nonprofit, I was in the development and fundraising side of things. And so that background, once again, in anthropology and understanding people and asking them questions and not making any preconceived notions really helped me when I was getting to know prospective donors and finding out why they might be connected to the mission of the organizations I was serving, and really getting to know them, and hopefully growing their giving to the organization through that connection. And over the last 10 years, I've been in software sales, and sales and the for-profit space is very similar to development in the nonprofit space, right? It's mostly about people and listening to them, asking questions, not making any assumptions, getting to know folks, and when the time is right, making asks of them that feel relevant, that feel kind of in keeping with who they are and what they value. So that's a little bit of my educational background and how it's played in my career.
Did you have how did you get into learning how to fundraise? Did you take any classes in college? Because you said that you did anthropology, so I'm just wondering how you got roped into learning more about fundraising.
That really was more of an outgrowth of working in the nonprofit sector itself. I'd been in the sector for a number of years, started to learn about what makes organizations tick, what the lifeblood of an organization is as far as bringing in funds for the organization. So part of it was just a curiosity and asking colleagues about it, and then expressing interest in taking on roles in that space, to ultimately actually getting jobs in the fundraising space, right? So part of it was just on the ground experience and finding mentors and asking for opportunities and being granted those opportunities. And then another component of it was that part of my work in nonprofit was at the higher education university level, and I ended up taking a number of courses that I was able to sit in on and actually get credit for from a development and fundraising standpoint as well. So most of my experience has been by actually living it and doing it, but then a part of my experience has been actually taking coursework at a master's degree level in fundraising and development and other elements of the nonprofit space.
So my second question is, how long have you been with OC Habitats, and what brought you to us?
So I started with OC Habitats as a board member last summer, so about a year ago. But prior to that, about 6 months prior to that, I got linked up with Stacy, the executive director of OC Habitats, through a program called Ready to Grow, where that program was linking up nonprofit leaders with those in the for-profit sector that were going to act as coaches for them to help them grow a sustainability plan and execute on the sustainability plan for the organization. So I joined the Ready to Grow program as a prospective coach, and Stacy joined as a prospective organization that would benefit from linking up with a coach. And when I joined, I mentioned that I wanted to work, if at all possible, with an organization in the environmental space, one that was working on conservation, a mission around the environment and preserving the environment and saving, our planet on some level. So it was a really natural link between my interest in being a part of the program and being a part of helping an organization in the environmental space. And then Stacy's clear intention of benefiting from a coach, but also being the head of an organization in that environmental space as well. So it was a really good marriage, so to speak, between what we were looking for and that relationship, which was supposed to be about a 9-month relationship and just kind of end with a strategic plan being presented to Stacy that we collaborated on, really grew more into a relationship, a friendship, and an opportunity to deepen my connection to OCH. So, a year and a half later, here I am, as a board member and doing more for the organization than I had originally intended, which has been an honor.
What moment in your life made you want to protect the environment?
It really started with having children. So I have 2 daughters. I have a 10-year-old daughter, Samantha, and I have a 7, almost 8-year-old daughter, Emily. And when my oldest was born, and especially after my second daughter, Emily, was born, I started to turn my attention more toward what type of world are we going to ultimately leave to them, right? When I get old and I pass away, what type of world do I want them to be in possession of at that point? And I hadn't necessarily been interested or even captivated by environmental issues prior to that, but that realization of wanting to leave a better world for them and realizing that I can have an impact on that really helped to kind of shape my interest in environmental causes and environmental issues, gaining more knowledge around that. And so I've been on a bit of a quest since then to get more involved, educate myself, and do things that I believe meaningfully move the needle on benefiting our environment in particular. So that was kind of the catalyst, was really becoming a father.
Yeah, I love that, because like the more I work with like environmental organizations and like just learning more about like our habitats, I think that I've definitely had those experiences where like people would say like, oh, like these organisms are not really going to be around anymore because they're so like heavily like endangered that in a few years they're going to be extinct. And it's like too bad that future generations are not going to see those like organisms anymore. So I understand. Is there a person that has influenced you in your environmental activism? I think you already kind of like touched into that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely my children were the inspiration, but I'm a big podcast listener, and one of the influences that I've had over the last several years has been an influencer, a kind of tastemaker, a thinker in the environmental space. His name is Rich Roll, and he's someone that I tell almost everyone about when I get to talking about this type of stuff. He's a vegan ultra athlete who really changed around his life, started getting involved in environmental issues as kind of a byproduct of adopting a vegan lifestyle and diet. And his podcast has, largely featured thought leaders in the environment, in veganism, in health and wellness, in spirituality, also in politics and arts as well. But most of his focus is on that, space around environmental issues. And so that's kind of a weekly companion for me, over the last few years, is listening to his long form podcasts, and from a distance, unbeknownst to him, but just like I'm sure millions of people that listen to his podcast, he's really influenced me and my thinking and my passion for and my knowledge of the issues that in part surround, kind of our environment and our world.
How would you describe OCH and its work in Orange County?
I would say it's relatively unique. I mentioned before that Stacy and I got linked up through that Ready to Grow program back in January of 2022. And it was awesome that I got married up with OCH because, as I said, I was looking for an environmental organization to partner with. Um, reality was that out of around 3 or 4 dozen organizations in that program, OCH was the only one focused on the environment. There were dozens of other organizations focused on really worthy causes and missions. It doesn't discount what they do, but OCH was the only one that was focused on non-human, directly human related issues, but more on the environment. And so I say unique from the standpoint of course, there are large global organizations and massive national organizations that have chapters or that have offices in the greater Orange County area. There's no doubt about it. But from the standpoint of a kind of hyper local organization focused on the environment and doing the things that OCH is doing around monitoring, restoration, but in particular education and getting into, the schools and educating the youth and having that type of early connection to the community in areas that are, I think, maybe sometimes overlooked with getting that type of education. I feel like that is a really unique and worthwhile endeavor that OCH is involved in. So unique is the first thing that crops up for me.
What are you focused on here at OC Habitats? Can you tell us something about any project that you're currently working on or one that you are particularly proud of?
So I mentioned that when Stacy and I first got linked up, the goal was to produce a strategic plan, essentially a sustainability model for the organization, where we were looking at everything from staffing to fundraising to the programs that are run by the organization, and then creating a plan for what we prioritize, when we prioritize it, how we're going to fund the priorities of the organization, how we're going to make that funding happen, etc. So it was a plan that had never really been pursued in a robust way in the past. So we completed that plan at the end of 2022, launched it at the beginning of this year, shared it out to the board, and got everybody's stamp of approval on it. So as far as a piece of work that I was able to help breathe life into for the organization, in part, kind of collaborating on that, I'm really proud of that piece of work. And then just from a more specific standpoint, my role on the board, so to speak, is heading up the development committee, right? So the team of folks on the board and on the professional staff that are focused on specifically how we're going to be targeting the gifts and the fundraising campaigns and the strategy around bringing revenue into the organization. So that's how I spend most of my time these days, is in continuing to think through and then executing on that strategy for the organization.
Aside from OC Habitats, how do you engage in environmental activism in other parts of your life?
Well, I know I mentioned it earlier, but I didn't mention this specifically, is that I do it largely through kind of my daily habits, right? So one of which is through my diet, right? So I'm a firm believer that a plant-based diet is not only a diet that is good for you on an individual basis, or at least for most people on an individual basis. We all have our own unique health needs, right? But I feel like by and large, it's a good, healthy way to approach one's diet is to be either plant-based or plant-forward, but it also has a great impact on the environment as well, right? So for me, choosing a plant-based diet, plant-forward diet, is a way for me to, dramatically reduce, the carbon footprint of the planet, to, really scale back on, the water that gets used in, typical animal agriculture. So trying to really, as much as I possibly can, extricate myself from economies and from ways of living that I believe do a disservice to the planet, right, and to animals and to our environment, is probably the most mundane yet profound thing that I do on a daily basis to, to benefit the earth, right? Beyond any sort of activism or volunteering that I do, it's more just the daily habits of what
Mhm.
I moves the needle, and what I believe we could all do to move the needle by, adopting a lifestyle that gets us closer to that, that
Mhm.
ideal situation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I think the fact that you do it like on a daily basis, like it's literally like in your routine, I think that that magnifies the more you do it and the longer you do it. So yeah, that's awesome. And then my final question is, if you were the king of the world and had the power to do anything to protect the environment, what would you do?
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I would really mandate a type of an approach to our diet and to shift, our mentality, especially, here stateside to, less processed foods, more plant-based foods, more whole foods, and to really have kind of an all-out blitz, as far as like a campaign and a messaging, campaign around not just the benefits of, but almost the need for us to do this in order to, in part preserve our environment. So there's a number of ways that you can tackle the issue. And I clearly know that even at OCH, that's not like the mandate of the organization, but I know that ultimately organizations like, OCH are all really focused on benefiting, the environment, and it's their own unique and powerful ways, right? So for me, if it had to do with, king of the world or president or whatever, and I had the chance to wave a wand or with the stroke of a pen, ideally make something happen, it would really be about, things I believe make really great impacts on how we show up on a daily basis, right? And
Mhm.
those daily habits having, in the aggregate, massive impact on, on the world and on the health of our planet and on, welfare of the animals that we share this planet with, all of the above. It checks a lot of boxes, right? So that
Mhm.
would be my first order of business, I think.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt, for sharing the work that you continue to do for our environment. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Make sure to tune in for more upcoming episodes. Bye.
I